like anyway.
Should at least be cold, yeah.
Yeah, because it's basketball season, and basketball's played indoors, and Mississippi State played in Jackson against Jackson State, but not at Jackson State. They played in the Coliseum. And you got to give credit. Chris Jans made reference to it after the game, where he's actually played in that game in Jackson and nobody was there. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't use that pointed of...
I mean, that's what he said, though.
Yeah, pretty much. That he was surprised by the crowd. Credit to State fans for showing up on a Wednesday night. Not, with all due respect to Jackson State, not exactly a compelling opponent to go out to see. And the box score says over 3,000 people were there. And you might think, oh, that's not a lot. No, it is, because that's an actual reported number of the real number of people that were there. It was a good crowd, and you surprise your coach, and that's a good sign for what's to come when conference play, which is just around the corner, and your crowd's at your home place.
Richard Cross called that game that he's referring to.
Yes, he did.
Against Mississippi State, and then the Mississippi Coliseum like 2-3 years ago, I guess that was. But yeah, another good defensive game for Mississippi State, but offensively, they had to find their way there up until the end, and finally their quality just kind of took over. 4 Bulldogs in double figures, led by DJ Jeffries, who is having a pretty decent season. He's been up and down, but he's been more up than down so far this year. And then it's a good night for Eric Reed, double figures for him. You know what you're going to get from Tolu Smith at this point. The most important number is they're 10-0, and they played Nicholls State or Nichols, I guess it is now, just Nichols, on Saturday. They should be 11-0, and then they have the game with Drake. If they're 12-0, I mean they don't have to do much in conference play at 12-0 with the way their net and the way their analytics are set up to get them a spot in the NCAA tournament. I mean 8-10 might get them in, to be totally honest. 20-10 regular season would probably get them into the. Well, you also have the game with TCU, so 21-10 or 20-11. I think you'd be okay. Yeah. I think you would be okay. So
the net also likes the SEC. I can't believe it. Generally. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got good teams. You've got Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Auburn. They're all, in the polls, they're all ranked in the top 15 or so. Alabama, could make a very strong case to be the number 1 team in the nation. If you can get a win in that group, couple of wins in that group. If you could, I think you play 2 with Alabama and Tennessee. If you could split with them, maybe get one more against, Auburn or Arkansas, and then take care of the rest of your business in the conference. Not only are you in, you're comfortably in. You're probably a 6 or 7 seed at worst.
The schedule hasn't exactly been daunting, but the fact that we're talking like this right now says a lot about Chris Jans and what he's done in the very early, not even starting conference play in his first year era of his tenure.
I'm beyond impressed. I'm almost amazed at how good this team has played. I never, in my wildest dreams, Borky, thought that we would be sitting here on December the 15th talking about a team ranked in the top 20. And ranked, a number are so high. And then, I just didn't think it. I didn't think it was possible. This was beyond my. There's overachieving, and then there's what Chris Jans is doing right now. He's on a whole other level of overachievement at this point. This team is definitely playing better than its talent level should allow it to. They're well coached. They play well together, and defense travels, man. And when you can play defense with that kind of intensity, it gives you a lot of opportunities. So they're fun to watch, especially if you enjoy a good knife fight in the mud, which is what their basketball style kind of is on the defensive end. They just muddy it up. They make it dirty. They make you bleed for every point. They still haven't given up. Jackson State had the most points they've allowed all year, 59. And they've played good teams. They played Marquette and Utah. Texas A&M Corpus Christi is a team that was in the NCAA tournament and returned all of their starters from a year ago. And yet they just hold everybody down defensively. So if that can continue, when they play in the SEC, they'll be playing better athletes, better basketball players. But we'll see if that can continue.
Hunter, you must have me confused for somebody else. He says, I know Borky doesn't remember and has made comments that Mississippi people don't care about basketball, but that isn't true. I have argued the exact opposite, not only on this show, but behind the scenes my entire time here. I don't know where that's coming from. I do think people in Mississippi care about basketball. I think that we have forgotten what fun basketball is like, and so you've seen kind of poor attendance as a result, but it's not because we don't care. It's because the products haven't been good enough to support. I mean, I would argue that with Ole Miss fans, who I had some people come at me when I was critical of their performance last night, talking about how the crowd wasn't good. Well, the crowd wasn't good because the product isn't good. Even when the product is decent, people show up and support Ole Miss basketball. I have argued about talking about basketball on this show for a long time, and it's not just college. 3 of the top 10 highest-rated NBA markets in America. 3 of the top 10 national NBA games, so not just the Grizzlies and the Pelicans, but all of them, are Memphis, New Orleans, and Birmingham. Draw a line from Memphis to New Orleans to Birmingham, and Birmingham to Memphis. And what is inside that triangle? The state of Mississippi. People here care. They absolutely care, and I've argued that for quite some time. But anyway, we'll get to the rest of your message. My whole life, basketball mattered a lot at State until Stansbury was fired. The hump was always packed. Wednesday crowds were even good in SEC play. Glad to see basketball is finally getting back to competitive like it was for years.
The SEC made a point a few years ago to elevate basketball. And that's when you saw new coaches coming in and a real emphasis on basketball. And it paid off. And now you have turned the SEC into a conference where basketball matters and where you have good teams year in and year out. And it's not like it was a few years ago where it was Kentucky, Florida, and then everybody else. Now you've got 5 or 6 teams that you can see winning the conference year in, year out.
Somebody says, I think Hunter is confusing the hate people give you when you talk NBA. Now, I haven't gotten anywhere with trying to convince people to let us talk more NBA, and I think that's probably the right business move, honestly, is to not do that. But we do have compelling and fun stars just north of our border and just south of our border for whatever that's worth to you. I know there are Grizzly fans in North Mississippi, and I know there are Pelicans fans on the coast. Hattiesburg is a sneaky good Pelicans town. Like you got Southern Miss, Saints, and Pelicans, and all the way up in Hattiesburg. Either way. Jeff in Grenada says he likes me a lot, but he doesn't like basketball. Fair enough. But this is State fans and Southern Miss fans right now, because they're 10-1, by the way, are starting to get that feeling back. And especially for State, like you mentioned, perspective is needed here because this is still year 1 and the SEC is a bear. So they're not going to go undefeated for the rest of the year. Like, they are going to lose games. It's going to happen. Great teams lose games. First-year teams with a new coach is definitely going to lose games. But I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that, wait a minute, even decent basketball is a lot of fun to be a fan of. We just haven't gotten it. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we'll get people that'll say things like, don't waste money on NIL and basketball because it should all go to baseball, and Mississippi State's a baseball school, and it is. You won a national championship 2 years ago. You have a phenomenal venue. People really care about baseball. They do. But don't forget, one, how important basketball is to your school because it makes it money to the tune of millions a year. And when it's good or even decent, as a fan, it is so much fun. And State, credit to Chris Jans for getting that momentum back so quickly to where 3,300 people are showing up to the Coliseum in Jackson to watch State play Jackson State on a Wednesday night in December. That means something.
I'm interested to see what the crowd is this Saturday at the Hump. You know, not a big game, but what else you got going on? Can you get 5,000 at the Hump for this team? They deserve it. I'm not a preacher.